Two things actually. Well, two things are really obvious to me. I think there's lots of other things I've picked up throughout the day. Primarily just there's a lot more sort of power and flexibility behind some of the software and tools we use that I was just not aware of previously. I tend to just do things that work and not, perhaps I need to push myself a bit further and explore some of the options available to me. For example, in Google Slides, it's got lots of different things and plugins and different tools that I just wasn't aware of and I will be using. The second thing is just general tips and advice in this kind of forum that people are swapping. So we'd have the information and resources online for us all very neatly packaged, but also just in class, people swapping ideas and giving information. And I've been typing notes pretty much all day because there's just been quite a lot of information. It's been a very rich day of useful information, to be quite honest. So I will be putting it to good use, I think.
I've really enjoyed the session about using social media with the students to help engagement. I thought it was really interesting looking at how somebody else within the university was using it in chemistry, particularly with the use of Snapchat. And just those short, brief ways that you can actually up the student engagement and help them understand what it is that they need to be doing, but in a quick, fun, more informative way for their level. And I think it kind of tied in with some ideas for me about the session on nano and micro teaching as well. So I think looking at doing those short bursts of learning and getting that across to the students would be really useful, because one of the things that we struggle with is that engagement for a 2-hour class. So if we can look at getting extra things in there that are just going to engage them for a short period of time and up their learning outside of the classroom, then yeah, fantastic.
Well, I mean, the project covers a lot of ground, doesn't it? You've over the last, how long has it been running for? A year or so. And you've done a comprehensive job through a number of different technologies and different number of pedagogical approaches. And I think the richness of the ground that you've covered really comes across today. I think talking to the other delegates is a real mixture of experiences and expectations of people who have come along today. There are people who have been involved with the project that obviously have a command of various aspects of the learning technology, and there are people coming along pretty much for the first time to these sorts of events that are looking for inspiration and ideas to apply in their teaching and learning.
Well, I did the webinar. I was involved with the webinar a little while ago, and then so Lillian asked me to come along today to talk about the appropriate assessments and the use of audio in assessing students. So we had a lively session about the use of podcast assessment that I've done on one of my second year modules, so we talked about that. So it's quite good for me to kind of reflect on that and answer some of the questions, because it helps you to kind of think through your own practice and reflect on it a bit afterwards. Because I've got to describe it and explain why I've done it, and people were asking some questions about the way it works and what value it had for the students. So it's quite good opportunity to kind of reflect on what I'm doing, and as I read, continue to kind of design it for the coming years. But in the final session then we were talking about audio as well, and I was talking to one of my colleagues about using audio to give feedback to students as well, which I hadn't really thought about before, but I think I might give that a go at some point as a little pilot thing and try giving feedback on their written essays in audio form to see how that works. So that's been quite useful, just reflecting with people on practice. Well, I think anything where you're trying to think about your own practices in the classroom and in the module design and in the assessment of students is a useful thing. And so this has been really good, because there's a resource there, obviously, building up a resource that people can access and that can use to help them to develop the thing. Because one of the things I've found is you can reflect on your own practice. You often know what the weaknesses are in the things that you do, but you don't always instantly know solutions. And also, sometimes you can hear the ideas that things other people are doing or that you see are possible, and then you think, well, how can I implement that? And you have to adapt it to your own module and your own way of working, but it gives you that kind of foundation, I think, for reflection and for working out solutions to stuff.
I think, and being really specific, lately I've been looking at making my PowerPoints, making sure they're accessible, and even for like the future, so that even if I don't have students with those specific needs right now, making sure my PowerPoints have like the text explanations. And for my first lecture, I've been working really hard on that and describing what's in the image for a student, say if they're blind. And so that was probably the most useful for me, because of course I use PowerPoints for every lecture. So this is something that I'm a resource I'm always using. And it was helpful to know that actually I was on the right track, because I usually put quite a bit of information in the notes section, which is more available to students than putting it in the alternative text. So actually I'm going to go back to using the notes instead of using the alt text. And then on top of that, I learned that PowerPoint has an accessibility checker, which I didn't realize it had. So now I have something to double check that my PowerPoint's accessible if I feel like I'm not fully on top of things. So my concern was that the tables that I was putting into a PowerPoint weren't accessible. And in fact, I can go and double check that. So that's probably the most useful. And a bit of a reassurance that I had actually been doing some things correctly. So that for me is one of the big takeaways from the conference.
That's great. Excellent.
I think it's extremely useful to practitioners who don't normally think about the accessibility issues that they raise and the challenges that they set for their students and their colleagues. And it makes it realistic, and people take examples away from here that are meaningful and useful straight away. I've kept an eye on this project online at a distance, and it's been really good to have an opportunity to come and see it in person.
The EU capability framework. The fact that, so we've been doing a lot of stuff kind of internally thinking about the GIST digital capabilities framework, but that's kind of huge. Whereas what I liked about the European framework was that it was teaching and learning focused. So it's something that's much more relevant, and you can directly link it to the academics and what they're doing. But what I really liked is the future teacher stuff, and that you've got the thermometer, which will do the assessment that the digital capabilities stuff does. And it maps it so you can see it. But the real winner is that then you've got, it says, well then, digital capability goes, right, you're lacking in this, and then you kind of go, well, great, now what? Whereas this goes, well actually, you know, you're good at this or you're not so good at this. Well, we recommend you look at the advanced thing of this, or you look at the intermediate thing, and it's there. So that for me, that's the winner. It's the teaching and learning focus of it, which kind of is what we want, because we want the educators to get it and use it, but also the fact that it's there and we can go, actually, it's this material and it's there. And a lot of it today was just it's quite comforting to know that kind of what we're telling people and what we think is kind of what everyone else is kind of saying and thinking. So my background's secondary, so a lot of this is kind of bread and butter in some respects because of the background I come from. But it's nice that, you know, I'm not kind of a little bit mad, and that I am kind of saying and thinking the right things, or getting upset about the right things. And so it's reaffirming. And yes, I really like the resources, the compass, and that capability framework, because I just find the GIST one is just a bit too huge and a bit like, yeah, now what? Great, but now what?